All right, welcome to Elite Prospects' first 2025 NHL draft ranking of the season, and it's coming a little bit earlier than normal because we've been hard at work watching Draft Minus One tape. We sent multiple people to the Hlinka, and then all of us have been binge watching hockey over the last 2 weekends. So we come here with over 1,000 game reports in hand. We've done the viewings. Of course, it's still very early. A lot can change. Our next board is probably going to look dramatically different in just a couple months' time. But we have an early draft ranking. We hope that we have some good takes that'll stand the test of time. And we begin with number one. Who is our number one other than James Hagens? Who else can be in that discussion? David?
I think this is a year with multiple different candidates, and this makes it very interesting. I think James Hagens is still the front runner, and we're going to have him number one unless someone has a different opinion right now, but it's probably his spot for the first board. But there are Roger McQueen. We've heard a lot about Matthew Schaefer internally. Some people think he has a shot at number one. Michael Misa is having a great start to this season too, so he could push for that number one overall slot too. And there's Porter Martone, who's a very good power forward with very intriguing skill set, who could maybe make a push later on. So we'll see how it shapes up. But right now, I think it's still James Hagens' spot.
I think with James Hagens, right, it's the combination of like elite skating, dynamic skill, and his very robust physical approach to the game. Of course, we haven't seen him play yet, so we're not going to move him from the number one spot that he claimed last year. But, I think there's, in all likelihood, he's number one because of his game, because of how he plays, that he plays center and so on. But there is that little bit of a chance because it's not just the one player, as David outlined. There's also Michael Misa, who is an exceptional status player into the OHL and is now off to a blazing start. So, Lauren, why don't you tell us about Misa?
Sure, yeah. Basically, Misa is probably one of the most well-rounded prospects in this draft class. He's got high-end tools. He's got high-end hockey sense. He's just got such a pro style of game. He's really honed in on his details. And the big thing we were looking to see from him this season was, could he take another step forward when it comes to like dynamic offensive production, which, after having played on such a deep Saginaw team last year that went to the Memorial Cup and won it, he was pushed down the lineup to more of like a third line, more of like a checking defensive kind of role on the wing. And so the big thing for him this season is this is his first full year at center. And I think he's really stepped into that role as Saginaw's first line center, and he's just run with it. I mean, he is the catalyst for offense. He makes something happen on every shift now. The 8 goals in 4 games now, I think speaks for itself, but it's not just the offensive side that has, taken that step forward. I mean, he is making defensive plays, he's lifting sticks, he's checking, he's physical. He kind of checks every single box that now early on in this season, at least if he keeps this up for the rest of the year, I think there's no doubt that he will eventually challenge Hagens for number one in this class. I think the potential here is just so high.
With Roger McQueen, it's been pretty interesting over the last few years to watch his evolution from kind of an open ice skill guy who didn't have much defense or physicality or that much mobility even, to now he's a very fluid mover. He's very physical, going out of his way to make contact with players, throwing big hits along the end wall. And defensively, he's looking like a pretty strong shutdown center in the early stages of this season overall. And then you add in the unique elements of his game. He's 6'5", and he has some of the best hands in the entire draft class. Generally, when you're looking at taller players like this, their reach can almost be a disadvantage, right? Because guys can get under their stick easier. There's more room. With him, there is none of that. Players have so much difficulty because he just reaches pucks in between their feet that they can't access and then skates through their hands. He's had more elusiveness, improved his edges. You see much more stability. He can cut back, make a quick play back through the opponent, and so on. And so he's someone who we've talked about as a first overall caliber player. I think in the early stages of this season, he's absolutely lived up to that billing. And so that ended up being our top 3 because the vast majority of people had this as the top 3 in the exact order. But those aren't the only top 3 guys. We have Porter Martone, as mentioned, and of course, Matthew Schaefer, who there's been some first overall talk as well because of his dynamic international play in particular, which Cam Robinson and Daniel G both had front row seats. So Cam, do you want to start us off on Schaefer?
Sure, yeah. I was fortunate enough to see him at the U18s as well there to end his draft -1. So, I mean, I think so highly of this player. The skating, the ability to transition from, elite speed moving forward to catch up to a guy, switch to that backward skating, hard C cut, cross, push. Like he just takes away space so efficiently from those oncoming forwards. I love his ability to jump and activate into the play, at the Hlinka there. McKenna was looking for him. He wasn't looking for his line mates. He was constantly looking back, like, where's Schaefer? How can we work give and goes? He would activate, drive down, they'd switch, he'd pop out to the middle. The club play, obviously, and that's where we've had those internal discussions, is that, with Erie last year as a young 16-year-old, the numbers didn't jump, which is unsurprising. Internationally, though, he was my vote for top defenseman at that U18s as an underage. And then at the Hlinka, he was dominant. He was the best defender there for sure. So the mono, it's going to play a role. We know it, right? It's going to limit how high he can fly this season, really, which will probably limit that little bit of buzz that, maybe he could push for 1. Realistically, I would say maybe he could push for 2. But now we're probably going to see a situation where these guys that we've already mentioned and some that haven't come up yet are going to push ahead of him as he kind of finds his form again in the new year, which just means that a team is likely to get themselves an all-star outside of the top 5.
The activation game is the biggest draw there. I think he's still trying to learn how to really dominate with it. There's some weird decisions when he does activate, but it's overpowering at times. But yeah, I agree with everything that Cam said.
Okay, so he also took our number 4 because, again, pretty much everyone there had him at number 4. So there's a lot of consensus in our top 5, and the consensus number 5 right now is Porter Martone. Lauren has seen him probably too many times. So tell us a little bit about who he is and what he does.
Yeah, I think heading into the season, we probably would have thought that Martone would be higher on this first board of ours. But I think, you look at the type of player he is. He's 6'3". He plays that physical power forward style game. He's got the finesse. He's got the hand, the high dynamic skill set. And I think it's just a matter of right now that we haven't seen him link those skills consistently right now. It's early on in the season, and he can definitely turn it on. And I have no doubt that he will find, that kind of next level eventually at some point this season, given the depth and talent that Brampton has this year. But right now, sometimes he can be pushed a little bit out of games, but he has the ability to kind of take shifts over. It only takes him, a couple strides, a fake this way, fake one way, to kind of break down opposing defenses. And I think that kind of high-end skill is something that we definitely can't ignore. We can't ignore the frame, the physical side of things. He likes to mix it up after whistles, and he's just a very interesting player that, is probably going to push and he's probably going to stay in our top 5 for the remainder of the season. It's just a matter of, can he find that consistency? Can he make off puck impacts more consistently? A better defensive work rate? Can he improve his pace? And we're going to look to see all those things from him. And if he can, he'll push even higher on this list at some point this season. But right now, I think the players that we have ranked ahead of him have just found that earlier on this year.
And just a lovely human too. Oh, sorry. I was just going to add is that everybody loves him, gravitate to him, right? The players do, the coaches love him. They respect it. He wears that C all over the place. A high-end character player too that teams will like.
Yeah, I think what separates the players at the top is really maybe the pace at which they play. We talked about Porter Martone, and he makes a lot of impressive plays, but it's really at a lower pace. He's not as fast as a Michael Misa, who makes the same plays but at much higher rate. And there's Roger McQueen, who's maybe in between them, but his skill level is even more impressive than a Porter Martone. So right now there's just a slight edge between these prospects, but any kind of great performance over a couple of months could move them up on this board, honestly.
Now, after the top 5, well, there is a lot of agreement in our top 5. There is no agreement what comes afterwards. This is a complete mess of a tier that we have now. Pretty much everyone has a different player in the number 6 spot. this tier can go all the way down to basically 12, 13, depending on how you want to shape it up. So there are lots of different candidates. The highest average ranked player right now is Malcolm Spence, but the player with the highest ranking overall is Victor Eklund. So we'll toss this over to Hattie Kalakash, our new QMJHL/crossover scout, to talk about Eklund's game.
He's just phenomenal. I mean, the pace with which he plays, the energy he puts into his transition routes is fantastic. I mean, crossover skating, handling inside movement, all the things you want from a transition skater he has. And he has these subtle little physical skills that you don't expect from a player his size. I mean, he's 5'10" and not even a half, 152 pounds, but he gets under opponents' hands. He moves inside of contact in order to kind of free his hands inside of a check along the boards, or just these little habits that really contribute to a game that should translate fairly well. I think he should be the next guy here. I mean, I struggle to see a part of his game I don't like. Even his defense is pretty good. Good energy, good reads, incredibly intelligent. He's very, very similar to his brother. Just a bit, I'd say more physically inclined, but not necessarily as physically competent. So I think he should be. If it's not him, it's Malcolm Spence. If it's not Malcolm Spence, I don't really see anyone else that contends here for 6.
Yeah, absolutely love Eklund, if I can talk about him a bit too. Like, you're right to compare him with his brother. There's a lot of similarities there. I think he plays with more pace too, and you described it super well when you said that he's maybe even more physical, but he doesn't have the same kind of technical ability and these physical skills yet. But it's going to come. Like, we've already see him spin off of check on the wall and get the puck to the inside, and he plays at super intense pace. Like, he's that kind of player who will do anything to score. He just wants it so bad, and that's a highly projectable NHL quality, and I think that's going to help him maybe succeed even more than his brother, having that even more intense motor, higher pace, and the skill level is about the same. Like, he sees advanced passing plays, he has all that kind of playmaking foundation, and he can score from range. There's not much missing apart from his size, and we tend to be careful now when ranking players of his size high, so that may be the argument against him. But honestly, he's such a player that you have to love. Like, you watch him, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, just him. I'd say him driving the line with Anton Frondell and Yves Wozniak at like basically every international tournament he's played, and just being the better player of the 3 every time I've watched him really cemented it for me. He's up there.
Yeah, I could add one thing. I saw him at the Five Nations last year, and even a year ago was impressive. And I even thought then he's going to be better than his brother, to be honest. And I love his brother's play.
Yeah, we loved him, honestly.
I'm a bit down. I'm a bit down on some of his decisions, but at the end of the day, like, we've learned that, like, poor decision making is kind of a thing that a lot of players grow out of over time. But there's enough special stuff in transition to kind of alleviate those fears. I don't think he should be this high, though. I think there's other guys like Cootes and Spence and Jackson Smith that I would take over him, but
I could see the argument for Spence for sure. Like, he's special as well.
Yeah, I had him top 5 for a while. He's not there anymore. Honestly, it's all about, like, we have a player who's really special in Eklund, who has a ton of upside. I think Spence's upside is maybe slightly less, but he's going to play NHL games. Honestly, I think you could take him right now and put him in the NHL, and he would still find a way to succeed in a bottom 6 role. He's that refined. He's that physically inclined. Like, he has all the right habits. He plays a strong two-way game. He has the power forward frame, and he makes power forward plays. Like, he cuts to the net, he retrieves pucks, he passes it to his teammates. We had doubts about his playmaking last year, and honestly, all of these conversations are based on the -1 tape more than the last weekend. But we've seen enough flashes of him being aware and finding teammates inside, with some deception even. And as soon as he gets the puck, that we believe in the playmaking, believe in the scoring game, and he has all those details. I'm not sure about the skating overall. I think the form is decent, but he doesn't seem like he's naturally explosive. Maybe someone can confirm that or deny that. It's early in the season, so things like skating are harder to evaluate, but he has just so much going on for him that it's easy to project him to a second line, the top 6 role on the wing, and be a kind of line driver and that solid piece that just makes the line work. I really like him.
projectability, right? That's 100% right. What's he going to be at the next level? Well, there's all sorts of avenues that lead to an NHL job. And like you said, the high end isn't necessarily there. But, at the U18s, I was really impressed where he did a lot of his damage early in the tournament, playing more upfront, playing more offensive, taking some more chances. And then as soon as the medal rounds came down, he was just like, okay, I'll play 18 minutes and just be hard and play north-south, pucks in deep, pucks along the wall. He's getting them. He's scooping them off. He's able to protect them and come out and make a nice little subtle pass. One of the elder statesmen too. So he's much more mature than some of the other players, but he has that frame. He has that mentality. He has that, durability to him. So I think you're absolutely right. If we're looking at just pure upside, it's Eklund. But if we're looking at like who's going to play, 500 NHL games, if you want to pay your mortgage on it, and you're looking at Spence. Yeah.
I'd have Spence over him personally. I think he just edges out.
So do I.
It's more conservative right now, and we'll see how Eklund does the rest of the season if the decision making improves. But like Daniel said, sometimes players who try the most are the most intelligent too. It's just that they want to expand their skills.
He attacks under pressure a ton, but at the same time, he's a really crazy manipulator. His pace, the tools are really, really good. So, and he's just violently physical in the last couple of viewings that I watched. So there's a lot of dimensions to him. There's risk, obviously, like mentioned, like he's really small, but he's really fun though. And I think there's a lot of the staff likes him. Like it's pretty much unanimous.
I always worry about those guys that are, 5'10", 150 and play so aggressively with their physicality. It's like, they just don't have the body to support it long term, right? Yeah. Some of these guys, if they're like 5'9", but they're 185 pounds, then they have that ability, right? They can withstand a little bit more, but a slight frame like his, like it could be trouble, or he's going to have to adapt how he plays, right?
Yeah, he'll have to adapt.
He'll have to adapt, right?
And he's highly adaptable, right?
It's just always as you move up those levels, once you run into the fact, I can't do that anymore. Now, how am I going to adapt my game to be as effective, right? So
I think Spence at 6 is how we're feeling on this front. So the question is, do we go Eklund at 7 or do we talk about Jackson Smith here?
Do we have enough support for Jackson Smith?
We certainly do.
Perfect, then.
So
someone should talk about him.
Yeah. Okay. So Jackson Smith is a 6'3" defenseman whose number one quality is his skating. He's powerful. He's a dynamic skater, but he's uniquely agile for someone of his stature. His ability to go heel to heel into tight turn, his ability to change directions quickly. And then you add in the fact that he is a punishing, violent defender who gets in people's faces early, closes the gap only to not just poke the puck away, but to hammer them into the wall, create that little bit of extra separation. And then he's a well-rounded offensive player too. Tri-City doesn't make a ton of plays. They're very much a pass up the wall, don't move from the point team. But he's highly, highly involved. He's always looking for plays off the rush. He's always looking to set up chances. He's good at walking into space off the point. He's not that sort of high-end manipulator that you see from the point. He's not doing the Cale Makar moves or anything like that, but the high activity level combined with the tools, combined with his willingness to experiment and to try new plays in an environment that doesn't necessarily allow that, suggests that he has a lot more offensive runway than you might think for a player in his situation. So he's someone who could very easily end up as a number 2 defenseman, maybe a number 3 or 4 if the offense doesn't come along fully, but he has the tools, he has the certainty, and he has the upside.
Yeah, I think if we're conservative, he should be ahead of Eklund still. We've learned ranking those kinds of players, like Cam said, over the past few drafts, that yes, durability is something we should consider a bet. I agree with Addy that he is going to find ways. He's diverse enough. He has enough skills all around to find ways to still be effective at the NHL level. But Jackson Smith's entire game is going to translate very well to the top league. So he's not going to have to adapt anything except the decision making and not trying as many plays. Do you want a number 2 defenseman or a top 6 winger?
For me, the choice is pretty clear, especially because of the uniqueness of Smith's game versus the smaller, more slighter Eklund, right? So for me, it's pretty clear, but if we have any last dissent, we'll hear it. But if not, we're going Smith, then Eklund.
I personally, there's a couple defensemen I would take before Smith. I have my reasons. I mean, the size and agility is fantastic. I don't see the decision making being something that I really like in his game. Whereas I watch, for example, Blake Fiddler and Radim Mrtka, and that's kind of their strengths, right? It's just making really strong decisions and staying on top of plays. I don't know, but like he's really good. I really like his game. It's just I see those two as better options, and I might be alone in that camp. It's just
you weren't alone in I think 2 weeks ago. I've changed my mind pretty hard on this.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing. If we went just off of his Hlinka tape, I'd be like, too rich. But just even going back and looking at a little bit of his D-1 into the start of the season, like he is fun. Like he's, like you said, Mitch, the uniqueness and just being higher on this type of player is going to turn out better for us long term, right? It's a player who's right. He's going to play games. He's going to be a useful piece in a top four in all likelihood.
Mitch's point about sorry.
No, go ahead.
Mitch's point about his activity level is so true as well. He's so involved, like it's insane. And I think like his development could go a bunch of different positive ways. Like he could become like a guy that's like really physical because of how easily he can surf across and kill a rush. But I agree with Cam too. Like this is like you make the bet on him high, probably looks good over time.
This is all trying to predict what's going to happen at the end of the season, and it's not about current performance, especially since we're ranking mostly based on D-1 tape. It's all about what we think is going to happen during the draft season.
It's kind of interesting because this is mostly seen as a forward-heavy draft, but some of the best debates that we're going to have throughout the season are going to be defensemen.
Yeah.
It's going to be how do we rank Fiddler versus Mrtka versus Smith versus Hensler. There's a lot of toolsy defensemen, lots of guys with high activity levels, lots of these defensemen who historically have been sort of undervalued in the draft, and now teams are just starting to figure out how to rank them appropriately and understanding that, you know, they might be a little bit rough on the turnover sometimes, but the good significantly outweighs the bad, and that gap will continue to expand as they grow into their role and into a more structured environment, right? So I feel like this is the debate that I'm most interested in seeing throughout this season. How do our opinions on this D class change?
Me too.
So I think we'll go Smith and Eklund, especially because we probably should just get Eklund down because there is a lot of support for him higher. But now this is another big open tier, right? Because we have Braeden Cootes in the WHL, who is a very physical center, great details, great pace. We have Lynden Lakovic, who is a 6'4" speedy winger with an improving playmaking game. We have the 5'7" wrecking ball, Cameron Schmidt. We have Blake Fiddler. We have Mrtka. We have Ryabkin. We have Hensler. We have Frondell. So this is a very interesting and challenging tier. So I think we'll throw it to Dylan to talk about Ryabkin right now and what he sees in his game and where he would rank him.
I'm a big fan of him to an extent. He's a very, very, very good passer. I think he's shown it at the best level when he's playing against men, which was a very short amount of time in KHL preseason. He played like 2 minutes against one KHL team and then a full game against a VHL team. And you can see the details of his passing game a lot better there compared to junior, where everything's a lot more chaotic. There's a lot less control with everyone's game in the MHL. So for a player like him that's kind of based around details, you kind of lose a lot of that. And from a pure playmaking standpoint, he would be like towards the top of this class if there was just more to his game than that. He's a good handler, but he's always handling, and when he's gliding, he kind of creates situations for himself to have to problem solve rather than kind of adapting to the game as it's flowing. And then you look at like his motor, that's been low all season. He's kind of just posting around. There's some physical aspects of his game, but they kind of come and go. And when you lose that playmaking in his game, he kind of doesn't have anything to fall back on. And which was an issue all season last year, where it's just he was getting all these points, but there was just no consistency to his game. Because one game he can, find all these passes, make these really nice moves, and the next game he can't get a pass off, and he just kind of fades into the background. You kind of lose him. He still pops up with like these crazy rushes with no real end goal, and you get like that idea that he kind of is a high skill player, but there's just been so many issues with putting it together. the junior environment doesn't seem right for him. I think that he could fill a KHL role with his skill set and be an actual, rather than just like a junior player, it's like playing like 3 minutes a game or something. I think he could play on an actual line and use that playmaking talent. And I think the defensive game would catch up a bit better in that sense. But right now, the performances in the MHL haven't been great. He hasn't looked like a top 10 prospect. Even going back into last year, the production was very, very, very solid. And he was clearly ahead of his age group, but his age group was not great. So right now, he's definitely going to fall outside of the top 10 for me, probably closer to 15.
Yeah, it's all about pace. We talked about Braeden Cootes, who does pretty much the same things as Ryabkin, maybe not the high-end dangle through defenders' feet and under sticks and all this. That's maybe the missing piece when we compare them. But Cootes plays at 2 times the pace, and he's even more physical. He has all those two-way details on top of it. He does pretty much everything. He's a really good center, and with all the center habits, drawing little arcs to pick up pucks, supporting teammates. And again, he plays in a better league against tougher opposition in a weaker, kind of a weak environment. Maybe our WHL scouts can talk a bit more about this. And he has a ton of skill too, so I would prefer him for sure.
I think Cootes, Desnoyers, and Ryabkin are just like three sides of the same coin in a way. Like they play very similar games. Cootes does everything with higher pace. I do like Desnoyers' overall handling and playmaking base more. And Desnoyers is a lot more meticulous and versatile as well. Like if you want him to play a defensive role, he can. If you want him to play a physical forechecking role, he can. Finesse, playmaking, handling, and he can do that as well. Just not a handler. He's not a high paced player. So if we're ranking based on that, and we value that a lot, which I do, I'd say my order for it is either Desnoyers, Cootes, Ryabkin, or Cootes, Desnoyers, Ryabkin. But I see Ryabkin as the lesser of the three so far.
My argument would be Cootes can do all that as well. Like, it's really early, but his game on, I think it's like September 27th, was absolutely ridiculous. Like, he may be the best defensive forward in this draft. Like, in terms of how he processes, how proactive he is, how physical he is, all the physical skill. And then he was even flashing like high-end hands, like he had a play where he broke in off the right wing, he dipped low, he pulled the puck through like the defender's feet or triangle, and then stopped up and finished in tight at the net, like really high-end play. The kind of the issue is he's on an island. Like he'll have games where he'll funnel like 4 or 5 passes like right into the hash marks, and nothing happens. So it's a bit tough. I'm a big fan of Desnoyers too. Like I think he's like a physical monster. Like he's just kind of like a bull out there, especially on the forecheck. And I agree with Hattie. Like the finesse game is definitely there too. Probably have Cootes ahead of Desnoyers and Ryabkin currently, but there's arguments for all of them.
Do we want to make this more complex and introduce another name into this? Because I think it's time to talk about Lynden Lakovic as well. Who Lakovic is a 6'4" winger. He's a very strong linear skater. So forwards, crossover, strides, perfect depth, lots of power, very fluid mover. Over the years, he's been more of a shoot-first guy, but we've seen in the last 2 seasons, starting probably the back half of last year, him become more of a playmaker, starting to find the trailer, starting to start passing plays. And the interesting part is that he's deceiving opponents to be able to create these lanes, and he's also putting himself in highly favorable position. So instead of skating until he runs out of space, he's proactively creating space and then cutting back. So he's giving himself a lot more opportunities to experiment and to push the limits of his game. We don't expect him to be a gigantic scorer this season, definitely not in the 100-point range. As a late birthday, usually to be a top 10 player, you're looking somewhere 90 points or something like that. But it's the uniqueness of his game. You don't see many players with this skill set. He moves and shoots and passes like a smaller player. With that, there are also some concerns on the physical side of the game. He never gets inside positioning, ever. It's not for a lack of trying. Oftentimes, it's just that he's late to plays. He doesn't quite have the physical skills yet or the awareness to know how to wedge his body in between the puck proactively, right? But if he can improve that, you're looking at someone who can play in the top six. He can drive play in transition, and he can also bring a little bit of defensive value too.
I think we're right to put all of these players in the same tier. It's hard to separate them right now. I think the edge should go to the players with the better tools overall. And for me, Lakovic,
yeah.
Thank you. Lakovic should be ahead of others because of that. Because a 6'4" frame, he doesn't play physical right now, but he could. And he has a playmaking game. He can score, and his skating, I think it improved over the past few years too. So very interesting player. All in projection, all in upside, but very interesting player.
Give me Desnoyers at this spot, though. He's a winner too, right?
You said it right. Good job.
Caleb. I'm just so impressed with him as a player, as a person. Like he's so mature. He does have tools. He does have skating. He does play the middle of the ice. You know, he shows up everywhere he plays and puts up numbers and plays roles where he's tasked with, you know, even at the U18s where they're like, hey, go check. Okay, go check. Go be a playmaker at times too. Like he just shows up, does what he's asked, scores goals, sets up plays.
Yeah, and he's one of the smartest players in the class too.
Exactly, right? The
just
details.
So intelligent.
Yeah. Nobody's batting for Frondell either. Like,
but we can talk about him a bit. We should, because we've just been pushing him down and down and down.
Let's get some names on the board, and then we'll talk about him. And,
Nice.
and don't worry, you'll go first on that front because you have been obsessing over his tape lately. Okay, so I'm in agreement with, I think Lakovic probably needs to go at number 9, and then I say we just run it the way we have it. So Cootes, Desnoyers, Ryabkin, and then that rounds it out.
And then it's Blake Fiddler time, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, too many names in my head. I'm too tired.
Yeah.
So Desnoyers gets a bit of a bump up based on where we had him in our pre-meeting board. He moves up to number 11. Ryabkin takes number 12. And then Lakovic and Cootes are 9 and 10. So now we should probably talk about Frondell, who just about every public ranking that I've seen so far has him top 5. So David, tell us why we do not have him anywhere near that.
I just don't see it with him right now. I've watched a lot of his tape, and it was that way last year too. I see him more as a middle 6 projection, a complementary player. I heard that his best games were at the Five Nations last year, and watching that tournament, all I saw was Eklund creating a ton of plays for him, like dangling through defenders, cutting down the wall, getting off the wall, and seeing Frondell open. Frondell is very good at getting open in spots. So he was receiving passes from Eklund and then making that next play to Wozniak or back to Eklund or scoring that way. So I think he's smart about when he moves away from the puck, and he has some defensive details, and his tools are project well to the NHL. Skating speed could be a bit better, but he has the handling, and he can make some crafty plays occasionally. But I don't see the massive upside that others see. And we have no choice but to compare our takes with the boards we have seen, because most of them have him in the top 5. I see him more as a maybe 10-20 prospect, or someone who's going to continue to fall during the draft year. And it doesn't help that he's injured right now, so we haven't seen him in his draft year really, except for a couple of friendly games during the summer. So we're going to evaluate this take a lot over the next few months just to make sure we're right about him. But the weaknesses right now are that he differs a little too much to his teammate. He lacks some dynamic qualities, I think. And while he's involved in all facets of the play, I don't see him as being super effective. So he's missing that elite layer of skill, and he's not someone who take over games. I think he's mostly someone who plays very well off others.
I'll also add, to a much lesser extent, when I watched Eklund and Frondell, I felt like I was watching Cooley and Guité, to a certain extent. The way they play off each other, the way that, you have one really driving the line, the other really kind of coasting behind and kind of picking up loose pucks, resulting from Eklund's hard work along the boards and intensity. Like, they're not straight comparables, but in the sense of the way that they play off each other, I see a lot of that. And yeah.
The only thing I would add is I saw a strong two-way game out of Frondell. Like that's where maybe he's like differs from Gauthier, you know? Like Gauthier was okay on D. I thought Frondell was actually really good.
And just that weapon of a one-timer too, right? Like it's an assault rifle there on that right side.
Yeah, I don't think there's any concern about Frondell not making the NHL. I think there's an NHLer there, right? Like there's just too strong of a base of skills across the board. I don't see. I think his upside is lower than what people are making it out to be so far. Is my take on it.
He's got to stay healthy. He's got to play.
Yeah.
So does anyone want Frondell as the next man up at 13?
I would have
No.
Cameron Schmidt ahead of everyone else we talked about.
And Blake Fiddler. Yeah. I like Fiddler. I'll go to bat
We
for
all
this
like
kid.
Fiddler, I think.
Yeah, he's awesome. 6'4", right-handed D with really good skating. He's the only defenseman in this class. I mean, the other expletives with how good his rush defending was. So overall, yeah, it's not just the rush defending base. We've seen these guys end up being, number 4s, number 5s, but there's an echelon of upside there with the passing out of his zone, the flashes of handling skill. He's still figuring it out, but he has good ideas. My read on him is very similar to Radim Mrtka's, but there's some hints of ideas that they have offensively that, once they develop the execution, improve the handling skill, improve the hands overall, you can unlock some two-way potential there.
Yeah, I think that's a great synopsis of his game, right? Like it's that you have the floor, you have the upside, and you have someone who just, like he's suffocating off the rush. He combines a lot of the USA hockey stuff, like the surfing, the managing speed off the rush. So he's not always getting stops deeper in the zone, or he's not always getting stops at the blue line. He's limiting chances. But then you also get a lot of the aggression that you see from the top CHL guys. So like there's no way really to beat him cleanly. Roger McQueen and him have a one-on-one yesterday. Roger McQueen can't even solve his range. He skates right in, trying to do the dangle thing. Fiddler pulls his stick out, so he can't go through his stick, and then just knocks off McQueen's stick, breakout, joins the rush. And it's that you see that against players of every caliber, every game, every situation. And then, as Hattie talked about the skill, how it's improving the activation game and so on. So tons of upside here. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ends up as a top 10 guy on our list as the season moves on. So the other WHL guy that we have to talk about here is Cameron Schmidt, who, generally speaking, because of David, this is not a safe place for short players, but he sees something special in Schmidt. So why don't you talk about him, David?
Oh, I get to talk about him. That's nice. For a smaller player, he's very inside-driven. He's very physical, and he has physical skills. So you can check those boxes. That helps projecting him. And then you have the super high level of skills. Like he makes special plays. He can dangle on their stick. He can score from a distance. He sees advanced plays. I heard that he wasn't as good as the Inkla, and I watched some of his games, and I can agree. But mostly, I think his WHL tape is super, super impressive. Like in terms of pure skill, if we don't account for size, it could be way, way, way higher on this board because of everything I said before. And I think you should all talk about him, Mitch and Daniel, and have a complete opinion of what he does because he's very, very fun.
I think Daniel should take this one away. I think he has the most recent viewing for us. So what did you see?
Well, I watched his game against Prince George. Obviously, he's scoring at like a torrid pace right now. But he had he's so far ahead of everyone else on the ice that when he's like streaking forward and for a pass reception in the neutral zone, he's already thinking about pumping the puck over the defender's stick and then burning on the inside. Like it's kind of like a level of I don't know how to describe it. Like he's just super, super engaged, super active. Like I have viewings going back to his D-1, and even in that year, he was like dropping down off the point, manipulating through like 3 or 4 players, shooting across the body, like picking quarter. Like he's pretty insane overall. Like obviously there's the question mark about his size and how inefficient he was at the Hlinka, but the roles that he plays in the WHL is fundamentally different. He's more of a downhill attacker and runs the show more than maybe an off puck supporting supporting type like he was at Hlinka, but I think this is the spot for Schmidt. He's just so skilled. I agree with everything that David said.
Can I bring up the dissenting? Because since this is my evil arc in 25, is that I agree. I agree with like literally everything said, and especially when Daniel said that in Vancouver he's running the show, and that's very obvious. But he won't be running the show in the NHL in all likelihood. So he will become that more supportive off puck player. And I do have some concerns with some of his vision and playmaking, or just decision making, whether it's the vision or not, where he spams those low percentage shots. And so he has that kind of agenda off the rush. He's like, he'll go a little inside feint, try to cut wide and burn the guy. And like sometimes he can get there and then he drives right to the paint. He'll work the backhand, whatever it is. But otherwise, he'll just take that low percentage shot off the rush or on the power play down low. If he's not working on the half wall and he's down low, he'll just be trying to goal line shots too often. I would like to see some more creativity, some more decision making. So if he was 6'2" when he was doing all this, I'd be like, well, he'll be able to adapt and adjust just because he'll have the size to do so. But at 5'8", now he's got to be that inside driven player, not being the man, with maybe not the highest level decision making with some of his playmaking. But that said, as a draft -1, I actually liked some of his playmaking ability. I thought he was really creative with moving the puck. And it seems like now that he is trying to be the man, that has kind of been pushed off to the side a little bit. So there are some more concerns with him on a pure skill basis, on like a physical basis, and on like a fun to watch player in the West. Like he's high end, probably higher than we're going to put him today. But then that next level is he going to be Logan Stankoven, right? Like that's going to have to be the type of player he's going to have to be at the next level.
Yeah, it's very early, but I think he could be better, honestly.
He could be. He's got more pure skill, probably.
Yeah.
Twice as fast. I mean, he's the fastest player in the CHL.
Yeah, he burns.
And for me, the size, he's one of those weird players where like him being short is to his advantage because of how he plays. Like he gets so much lower than everyone, knocks them off balance. Like, generally you get low and you hit guys in the hips. He hits them in the knees. Like he gets so low that he just goes right into them, knocks them off balance. He wins way more battles than basically every other player in this draft class. Anyone who touches him gets seated to the ice. Like the level of physicality here is pretty special, and it works to his strengths. I mean, of course, there are lots of translatability questions about it, but I don't know if we've ever seen a player with his stature, with his skill set, who is as robust physically as him. Like,
yeah,
talk about like
I think the 156
different planet.
Yeah, like the 156 feels like a lie. He's a tree stump. Like he's an angry tree stump is how I would describe him. Like a really good skating angry tree stump. He's fun to watch. I love him.
Yeah.
So Fiddler or Schmidt? What do we do here? I'm confused.
I would have Schmidt.
I would go Schmidt Fiddler for now. So
I really think he's special, like very special. We'll see.
I agree.
Again, super
Schmidt
early,
Fiddler.
but there's something there that's
Okay, so Schmidt, Fiddler, Frondell, that's our top 15. And so now it continues to get even crazier because we have two defensemen here who have both had top 10 arguments made throughout the draft cycle for us so far in Logan Hensler and Radim Mrtka. So who wants to talk about Mrtka? And I assume David is going to want to talk about Hensler because that's his guy. So David, talk about Hensler and then someone step in on Mrtka.
They're both my guys. Everyone is my guy. I used to. I'm going to talk about Hensler. I'm going to let someone else talk about Mrtka. Hensler is your typical very toolsy defenseman who is a bit bland right now, but could add a ton of other dimension if he wants to. So he's a above average skater. He has the size, the reach, the handling skills are projectable to the NHL too. It's just that right now he doesn't make many plays, but he has the defensive details. Like he can play a shutdown game. He did that last year with the USNTDP. He was very consistent, a bit boring, vanilla, but he made all the right plays, just not creating any advantages for his team. I anticipate that over the course of the draft season, he's going to push his offensive skills a bit more because we've seen flashes of some playmaking ability or ability to activate up the ice or create scissor play at the line with his teammates. So he can complement others well. And just having that high level skill set. I think it gives him a lot more opportunities for development, and I think NHL teams are going to really like what he brings as a right shooting defenseman who skates that well and cares about the defensive side of the game. I think it's about his right spot, and I would have him ahead of Mrtka right now just because what I've seen recently from him.
I'll add about Hensler. I saw him a lot last year. I thought, well, I started seeing him 2 years ago. And I thought 2 years ago he was more dynamic defensively than last year. Now, maybe he has crossed over into this other role, and he is. I like his speed. You're right. He's got a right-handed shot. He can score some goals. I thought last year maybe he overhandled some stuff too much, so maybe that's why they sort of calmed him down. He did end up getting, a fair amount of points, but I thought he was going to be at a higher level offensively by last year. So this year I'm anxious to see him, but I think this is the right range.
Yeah, teams definitely will like him for all the things David said. And like you said, like last year at the very beginning of his draft -1 season, I was like, this kid pops, like he's going to be the best player on the NDTP here on the blue line.
Yeah.
And then by the time I saw him at the end of the season at the U18s, he was still very good. But like you said, he wasn't dominant, and he doesn't, he just doesn't create a ton with what he does, but he's very smooth out there. He's very calm. He's, poised against the rush, and he can make those outlet plays. It's just not anything jaw dropping. He just goes about his business with size and speed and on the right side. And I definitely prefer him over Mrtka.
Really?
Shocking.
Not a shock there at all, but I still do quite like Mrtka as well. He's a 6'6" right shot defenseman who combines like massive range with really solid rush defending, and he's very bold in his defensive actions and very intelligent. He's constantly scanning the ice, has a really good mental map, and has a degree of composure and comfort in the Czech Pro League, which we did not see from a guy like Adam Jirček last year, for instance. And while the offensive tools still have a way to go, he's not the best skater in the world, and the handling definitely lets him down on his on-puck plays. They do see a really, really competent defensive piece here. He's definitely more entertaining to watch than Logan Hensler, but I also see a lot more polish in Hensler's game, even if I enjoy my Mrtka viewings considerably more.
With Mrtka, the thing that I really like is his willingness to activate. He's always jumping down on the weak side. He wants to be involved. He's considerably raw, like very raw. Like the tools are, the skating's kind of all over the place mechanically. The tools are all kind of like a tick above average, but it looks like he has more runway in a lot of areas. He's kind of like a big time projection piece. And when you consider 6'6", right hand shot D, activates, has some good defensive qualities already. He's kind of a mess at times, but projecting out, like this is kind of why I have him in this range. I'd probably put Hensler above him just because I like the mobility better. I see more, like he does play a boring game. I agree with that. We were having a lot of discussions in Slack about is he boring? Does he have exciting flashes? I still see the flashes sometimes. Like I had a recent viewing where he went end to end. He beat an F1. He dangled another guy on the blue line and then cut in on the net. But it's just they're really far and few between across the viewings. So I'm just really curious to see him this season. Like it's all for Hensler. It's all D-1, right? So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Mrtka could be ahead of him, I think, on another board, or Hensler could as well. It's just we just don't know too much, I guess, right now. What changes has happened for Hensler over the summer, I guess.
These two really remind me of the debates we had between David Jirček and Simon Nemec in terms of skating versus a high event player who maybe has more upside. It reminds me of that.
Yeah, I will say
was way better, right?
We're not getting to this right now.
I will say with Mrtka, what's promising. I agree that he's very raw, especially in terms of his execution, but it's his ideas. Like I've seen him look off passes, attempts at give and goes, kind of rolling his wrists through receptions and retrievals in order to escape pressure, pointing his feet one way, skipping the other. There are ideas there. It's just the execution isn't there yet. I feel like you can work with that rather than a player who has the execution, has the tools, but has no way to use them, right? I think Mrtka's already figuring out what works and what doesn't in a pro league. That's what makes me high on him. But yeah, it took me some time to get around him as well. Like David and I were on opposite ends until I watched his league tape, and then I was like, yeah, this kid's legit.
Yeah,
I will
and then
say the
we
one
flipped
thing is
again.
that I know everybody rates his IQ pretty high, and the reason that I don't, and I think this just dawned on me recently, is that I don't think he does understand his limitations, and that's what causes kind of this chaotic, this where he does activate, he does jump down that weak side wall a ton, but with often no success or no skill to pull off the play he wants to pull off. And so you can kind of look at that from two sides. It's like, we like that he's trying things and maybe he can develop that ability, which would be huge. And that's where the raw projectability comes in. Or it's like he doesn't have that ability and he should learn to play back and safer and just become that 6'6" sturdy defensive defenseman with, decent skating, as long as he can like fix up some of those mechanics, because it's powerful. It's just not pretty to look at. But
Sounds like a guy who would do really well in the WHL. A little bit of
Yes.
extra time and
Oh.
space. Start
And
reading
we had the rumors.
defensemen to make his plays.
Yeah.
Yeah, we thought he was
Braeden
good.
Cootes could use some help. It would be nice to see him
Yes.
with the T-Birds.
Right.
The main reason I soured on him is because he's right now he's playing 4 minutes a night in the pro league. He's not going to figure it out. Like he's a June birthday, he has a ton of runway, but he needs to play. So yeah.
Makes it easy to watch ISO tape on him anyways.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we'll go 16 and 17 there. I think this is a debate that we're going to be having every time, and we're probably
Yes.
going to lose like 40 hours of Slack chat to this discussion. So we can now talk about Ravensbergen, the goalie, although we can move him down just a little bit more. We can talk about Brady Martin, Kashawn Aitcheson, who Central Scouting gave him a little bit of a bump up in terms of height. He's actually 6'1.5". So he's taller than we thought, a rare guy who was under measured by his team. Jake O'Brien, Justin Charbonneau, who I'm a big fan of. There's a lot of good names here. So why don't we start with Lauren? Who do you want to throw into this ring from the O?
I think I had Martin ranked above O'Brien and Aitcheson. I really like the skill set, the package, the defensive work rate. He's not the most mechanically smooth player. The handling it can be an issue at times. He's not the most fluid skater, but he's got a high work rate. He pushes pace. He's flashed higher end playmaking. He's got a bomb of a shot. I just think he could really see him as like a third line center checking role in the NHL. I just think that's kind of his upside. But if he can add another layer of, manipulation, deception through his playmaking, I think, this is kind of his range. And we'll see if he can do that over the course of the season. He doesn't have a lot of help in the Sioux right now. But he and Travis Hayes, another draft eligible, they've showed pretty good chemistry so far to start the season. So I think that's why right now I just really appreciate Martin's kind of well-rounded skill set, and there's potential to develop into something better.
He's also a wrecking ball too. So, he's the type of guy who when he goes in on the forecheck, he's not just trying to hit someone. He's going to hit them to then take the puck. It seems like every game he has 2 or 3 of these plays on the forecheck where he launches someone to the ice, but then there's immediate offense from it. He's great at just like linking all these ideas super quickly, even if he's not the quickest mover.
I think that's his range.
From North America, he would be my next guy.
I can mention Aitcheson for a minute, because I did speak to him about a month ago. That article's up on EP, but like what I did see when I was studying him was, he can move the puck well. He's actually got a pretty good smoothness in his wrist shot. He's not going to be a high-end scorer. What he is he's a high-end mental guy. He intimidates, and he likes getting in the opposition's head, and he loves that. And he basically is challenging guys in the corners, and he knows if he's got them shying away even for a second in the game, that he's won that battle. And he's going to exploit that the rest of the game. He's a smart kid. He's a physical kid. And so, he's pretty impressive. Like, it's the makeup of him is what's going to really sell teams. The rest is all good, but the makeup is what's really exceptional about him.
Another guy who activates a lot, like a lot.
Yeah, not afraid to get in there. Yeah. And lots of jam. So much jam too, right? Like, he's good. He's fun.
if I were ranking like the 3 craziest puck battles I've seen over the last 2 years, Aitcheson would have been the victor in all of them. Like this, the way that he goes at guys along the wall, it's crazy. He charges straight at them. He still has the details, of course, but it's the speed at which he catches up on them, and then he just starts beating them down. And there are lots of competitive guys in the OHL, but he can basically break anyone.
Do we like Martin more or him?
I like Martin more. I
Me
think
too.
I also have Martin a fair bit higher than where we have him ranked. So I think
I do too.
I like Martin better as well, but
Brady Bunch, rise up.
yeah, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So we can do Aitcheson at 19 and maybe put Ravensbergen at 20.
yeah, I can talk about Ravensbergen a bit.
All right, go for it.
So the story with him last season was he kind of like walked on to the Prince George Cougars camp, and then he got a contract and basically won the role over a drafted goalie. He's a southpaw. Last season he was like 6'3", 6'4". This season he's like 6'5.25". This year specifically, there's been a bit of issues with rebounds and rebound control and that kind of thing, but he's ridiculously good, like ridiculously calm. Not a goalie scout, so I can't really get too technical, but just seeing his games last year, he was on like shutout streaks, and like he's just kind of dominant. He's like the first Canadian goalie in a while that's just played really, really well. So he's on a really good team. His numbers are probably going to be ridiculous this season. Probably the range around here, he probably could even go higher eventually. Not ready to do that, but yeah, he's insane.
Yeah, I think this is low for Ravensbergen even. Like the reads and mobility for a 6'5" guy is ridiculous. I think that he's one of the best goalie prospects we've seen in a while, and he might there's a chance he ends up top 10 on draft day. Like if a team's really looking for a goalie, he ticks every single box in terms of what teams look for.
He might be Canada's starting goalie in the World Juniors this winter.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
I think he probably will be. Like, there's no better option right now that I can see.
Technically sound, 6'5", great feet, great reads. Like
still
really
growing,
really
Still
good
growing.
kid too. Really good kid. Everyone loves him.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
He's like uniquely well-rounded, right? Like when you're looking at junior goalies, even the great ones, there's always like one area where they just get beat all the time. There's nothing like that in his game. There are no holes. It's just he's big, he can move, he's very well-rounded, he's great at tracking the puck, he's great at managing space and distance from the shooter. You don't see him get beat from sharp angles. The only way to beat this guy is like a double deflection or something like that. Like there aren't many opportunities for CHL people to be able to shoot through him or around him, right? So
he should be like 13 on this board for us too.
Right. Yeah. Like generally when you look at goalies this size, right, there are lots of holes when they move. He's so tight and so compact and so upright in his lateral movement that you don't get to shoot through him ever when he's moving across the slot. So very like just a very high-end skill set. So we'll see how he performs throughout this year, but he looks like a guy who could be moving up significantly over the next few months. Okay, so this is where it kind of becomes a little bit more about conviction. I think in our first board, we have 12 spots left to fill. There are some guys that we're going to have to get down regardless of conviction, but I think for the most part, so does anyone have a really strong opinion about someone who needs to go 21?
Yes. Jake O'Brien. He's right there on the list. I like him more than you guys. I think he has some size at center. I really like his playmaking game. The issue is that it's his only dimension really right now, but it's very advanced. Like he can lob passes to teammates. He spots everyone. He has deception. And if he can learn to add more stuff around, like a better physical element, more of a score, I think he could become a prospect that we would like to push much higher on the board.
I also will go to bat for Émile Guité. He's mainly playing away from Maxime Massé in the queue right now on their lines. He's on their second line mainly right now. And he's been phenomenal. I mean, we already know how good his shot is. We saw it at the Hlinka. We saw it last year, but he's shown a more well-rounded game. Showed a bit more hockey sense that I initially thought from him. No points in a 7-4 win yesterday as of recording this, and I still thought he was one of their best players. Good on the forecheck, decent skating, but release the release that makes his game tick. He's a half-wall shooter, and I think he's one of the best shooters from this draft class. Like, he's got a ridiculous release. So I like his game overall. I like him more than Carbonneau for sure. I think there's a gap between the two, even though Carbonneau's, I mean, I can talk about him at length. You guys know how many thoughts I have about this player, but Émile Guité for me so far is a better of the two.
Guite's off puck game's like pretty crazy in my opinion. Like,
Yep.
he connects plays like through the cycle so easily, and he always supports the pass so well. Like, and then when you consider that shot, that's like, it pays dividends. I have Guité over Carbonneau, but just thinking about it, it's like there's a big tools difference. And even though some people might disagree with me, I think the sense is probably closer than we give credit for. Even though Carbonneau has a lot of decision making issues, and I think it's tricky right now. And there's also William Moore and a bunch of other guys as well, I think, in this range.
Yeah,
I'll give you. I was going to say, I saw William Moore for that first weekend. I was trying to make him bigger than he was that my eyes were seeing, and I didn't see a lot. So I didn't think that much of him, to be honest. I thought if I was going to fight for someone here, it'd be Cole McKinney. Cole McKinney is tremendous. His speed, his all-around play, probably one of the better penalty killers in this draft. His face-offs are terrific. Like, sometimes he's in the 60-70% range, depending on who he's facing off against. Really fast, good backhand, but also, like I said, can play in every situation. So, as a center.
Yeah, I haven't seen quite that with Cole McKinney, but I'm definitely with you in terms of the skepticism around Will Moore, who has all the tools in the world, and Will Moore at his best is a top 15 or top 10 prospect in this draft class, but we've only seen that in sporadic shifts a couple times a game. But with Cole McKinney, I see a player who is definitely put into all situations. Like, he plays big mids on the penalty kill for sure. I see his scanning habits in the defensive zone as a real problem point. He picks up the primary threat consistently and very well and proactively, but he consistently misses like secondary and tertiary guys defensively. And in the offensive zone, he has a really solid release. I think his top speed is relatively decent, but the skating mechanics are pretty choppy. I see him more as like a second round guy who can do a bit of everything, a bit more in the mold of like a Danny Nelson from a couple of years ago in terms of like a solid two-way guy who goes late first, early second round, who can do a little bit of everything, but is just not a top 6 NHL projection. Whereas Will Moore is the exact opposite. Like, he could be easily a top 6 guy. I see a lot of like shades of Michael Hage, for instance, in his game in terms of how he handles the puck, the flashes in transition, blending high-end skating with fantastic handling ability. The flashes of playmaking are really good, but we have not really seen a motor higher than like a 2 or 3 grade from Will Moore so far this season, or in his D-1, which has been a real point of issue for me in my viewings of him. And he hasn't really taken the bull by the horns just yet in an NTDP that is starved for star power and for somebody to lead offensively and take the charge. And he is the guy in terms of like skill set who could do that. But I mean, as our board is showing, this is not the strongest NTDP class that we've seen in the last little bit. And I'm a bit bigger of a fan of guys like Jack Murtagh, for instance, and Carter Amico. Those are two very physical players, one forward, one defenseman, that I think are probably a slight edge above a guy like Will Moore or even Cole McKinney at this stage. But it's one big glut of guys from the NTDP, and how they're ranked individually isn't the most important to me because there are very different profiles in most cases here too.
The only thing I would say about Amico is he was like a little shaky with his skating. He was like he was kind of like a little clumsy, I would say, for his size.
He's definitely a bit clumsy still out there, but he's a fantastic transition defender. He's really bold. He's a bit like Mrtka in that sense, where he's just absolutely massive. Uses his range really effectively, very tight gap. He's also a really solid puck handler. The flashes of handling in transition are really nice, and he uses that to either access the middle of the ice, make a quick 1 or 2 touch play to a streaking forward, or even just carrying it up on his own. He's a guy that I think is going to be a riser between now and draft day. And whether we rank him in around here or in like 5 picks time, I'm not overly picky on, but I do think that he's the best projection among the NTDP class at this point. But Jack Murtagh is a violent goal scoring forward that I'm a really like. I very much appreciate how he plays the game of hockey. And he reads the game well. Not the best skater in the world, but he seeks out contact, whether he's on puck or off puck, playing offensively or defensively, about like 8 times a shift.
Murtagh is also a August 22nd born player.
Yeah.
He's very raw. Like that's the big thing that I came across my viewings, but that shot is like really special. He's physical, but there's not a lot of refinement. He just kind of like chucks his body around and just plays violently. But I'm a fan of him. He's more of a projection than I would like. Just like Moore is more of a projection than I would like at this point. But yeah, I don't know for this range. Like
We should just go with maximum upside. And for me,
Yeah.
that's Amico. Like he's a super long shot. Like we don't know
Yeah.
exactly how it's going to go, but if he improves gradually during the year, his package is really insane. And I like the way he's really willing to try plays, and even if they don't work right now, so I would put him there and just hope that he really figures it out.
So if maximum upside is the argument that we're making here, then we have to have Will Moore next. We have to have Will Moore next for all the reasons Sebastian just outlined.
Yeah.
He's, with a little bit of improvement, he's a top 10 guy in this draft. It's just a matter of if he's going to finally take that next step in his development after all these years.
Yeah, you know what it was? He just doesn't, and again, this was just a couple of games early in the season. He just didn't try to impose himself on any kind of play, but you could see talent. But that's what I was saying. I was just looking like, come on, man, you could do this.
It's exactly that. It's like there's such an opportunity for him to take this team by the horns, and just every game I've seen, he just doesn't. And it's frustrating, but the skill is definitely there. The skating is there. It's just use it, man. Like, come on, you know.
Remember what we thought of Hage after the showcase as well last year?
Yes.
Which is a comparison Sebastian just made, where he was very much passive, just waiting for the game to come to him. And when you're at this level, the game won't come to you. You have to take control. You have to be the guy in the middle of the play. And I think for Moore, that's going to be a process, because this has been years of him, being very positionally sound, very skilled, but not yet having that next step. But I think the Fargo series did show him being a little bit more aggressive in how he plays, trying to control the game more. And in a couple months, he might be a completely different player, very similar to how Hage was by November and December. And then I think we have to get the two Q players down here, and I think they got to be back to back. If we're going Guité over Carbonneau, we got to have them back to back, because the dynamic skill of Carbonneau in terms of upside, we're looking at someone who can be a game breaker. He has everything. It just comes down to tightening up the reads, being more aware of his teammates, and understanding that one-on-oneing every defender probably isn't the most efficient way, especially when you can make insane passes.
Yeah, no, it's he's a frustrating player at times. I mean, you can clearly see the combination of skating, the elite shot, the above average playmaking and handling, the physicality. Like, he has all the tools. It's just sometimes he makes decisions that make me want to rip my hair out. And I've had multiple discussions with you guys in Slack about this, but basically, like, you see some flashes, right? Like look-offs and rolling his wrist through his passes to connect with teammates at the back, that are behind him. You can see that there's some processing there, and his pace of decisions is really quick. I was having this discussion with David. We were talking about how those look-offs are kind of a sign of hockey sense. So for me, the question is that going to be enough? Like, when he's made his mind up 5 strides ago about which pass he's going to make, does it matter that he's using a look off to connect? Once he gets against pro competition, is that going to be enough? I'm not sure. In order to connect at a high level, but whatever happens, it can fall back on the shot, the physicality, the skating. That's a foundation that he can rely on, even if the passing doesn't pan out. And I don't think it will. I think he'll end up being a sharpshooter at the NHL level. But that's my read on him.
That's a very good point.
Okay, so do we have any other conviction players available, or do I just get to put all my players on the board now?
I'm going to give you another player.
Yeah.
It's not a conviction one, but it's one that there's a lot of spotlight on Adam Benák, right? And he could do everything that you want him to do as a center. We're all going to question, what is he, 161 pounds, 5'7". I don't know if he's going to grow, but in game, he looks terrific. Like his speed is good. Saw him get a big time game winning goal. He's noticeable on every shift. He's a play driver, but again, we're all going to talk about the 5'7", 161. So I don't know where he should fit in with that, but he actually does play the center position really well.
And he's a
international
first
kid,
rounder
right?
in my eyes as well.
Like everyone chipped in at the same time there. That was amazing.
100%.
Everyone has thoughts. Let's go.
But Benák is like he's all pace and all intelligence, which I just love in his game, and it's also what I see as a lot as like the compensatory aspect of his toolkit for his size to play the way that he does and still make a big effect. He's still getting acclimated to North American ice. He's still thinking he has enough room to get by guys when he doesn't, and it's still an adjustment period at the moment. But the intelligence, the raw intensity and pace in every single shift, he's very physically engaged despite his small stature, has good leverage mechanics, and he's a great puck handler as well, in tight. It's very difficult to dispossess him, and the flashes of playmaking still have only been flashes in the USHL this season, the first couple games, but boy, have they been bright. There's a lot of upside with this guy. Definitely still some question marks, and there's more risk with Benák than there are with other players in this range. But him and Benjamin Kevan are the two other USHLers that I really like here at the tail end in the first round. Both very dynamic in my eyes. Especially Benjamin Kevan. He's all dynamism. He's an even better skater than Adam Benák is, and he's also just returned from his injury and played really well last night in that return against Waterloo. So those would be the last two USHLers that I'd be pushing for in the first round. Like guys like Charlie Treadaway and Maceo Phillips are, I think, honorable mentions at this point. But those two dynamic forwards have definitely won a spot in my first round at this point.
Yeah, I can add to Kevan, like before he got hurt, that game he was terrific in. Like he's a mature kid. Like I spoke to him for a long time. There's going to be an article coming, and he has a maturity and a brightness to him that you see on the ice. Like that's that's what I would like to add to what Sebastian said. So I'm pretty high on him too.
Really good at the Hlinka. Really, really good. With Benák, just pulling it back a bit, I don't think I've kind of gone like up and then really down on him a bit because I thought he was more dynamic at the Hlinka. He was a more efficient creator, and then in the USHL, he's just like it's more like frequency of plays, and like 1 out of 3 connecting more than actual, more than actual like just dynamic play. And the issue with him really comes down to role. Like he's not going to be a center at the NHL level. So what is he going to be? He's going to be a playmaking winger at 5'7". It's just tough, right? I think there's a lot of support for him though. So I'm just not sure like if the projection is really all that flush right now.
I'm definitely okay with having Kevan ahead of Benák at this point. I think he has a little bit more popular support, has a more projectable frame, and he's also a guy that I think will be a center at the next level. But yeah, as you mentioned, with Benák, he will in all likelihood be a winger in the NHL. I do think that his motor, his defensive engagement, his just incessant intensity help that projection a bit, but there's definitely some question marks.
I think the only thing stopping Benák from being a center is the size. Like he has all the habits, everything you look for from a center he has. He's just tiny, right? Is that enough to make him not a center? I don't know. He might be the exception to the rule. Like his center habits are really, really good. He supports down low, gets engaged as an F2 along the boards when he needs to, and kind of lays off when he needs to as well. His game's about support, intelligence, pace, and that like screams center to me. But yeah, he is tiny. I
just can't see an NHL coach even that passing through their mind. Like they wouldn't even it wouldn't even be attempted. Like I think, so like I don't know. It's very tough right now for him Just looking at how he's playing in the USHL, just how inefficient he is at times. And then he's like, he's playing kind of like a weird game where he's like uber physical at times too. So it's like it comes back to that situation where this is a guy that has to adapt now, like because he's not going to be blowing up guys at any higher level. So it's just difficult right now with his projection, I think.
Is Mooney more projectable?
He's even smaller, unfortunately.
No, I don't think so.
He's actually, yeah, I think he's half an inch shorter.
Yeah.
On pure skill, though, I'd say Benák has more.
Yeah, for sure.
Mooney plays like he has some good details to his game, but I mean, if either of them are drafted in the first round, they'll be the first skaters ever at their size to be taken in the first round, right? Like there's no precedent for it to happen. And like Caulfield had to score at like historic rates to get in there as a 5'8" guy, right? Even DeBrincat going like back-to-back 50s couldn't even sneak into the first. So it's like, it's just like everyone said, for both those players, the uphill battle is going to be so massive that they have to be so dynamic offensively for the coaching staff to be like, yeah, okay, we can play him in the top 6, or they need to become Connor Garland, which is, a pretty tall task. And, it's like a 1%er these guys break, right?
Yeah. And Mooney's also
in the first round. We're ranking him based off of what exactly?
Yeah.
Last
he's kind
year,
of
because he hasn't done anything this year. He hasn't been a factor most nights at all. Offensively.
He's really good at like kind of adapting to better players and playing like a cycle game and getting the pucks to the net, but like nothing like super high end. What about a guy like Cole Reshny?
Yeah, we need to get Reshny down for sure.
Right? Like he's another one where you're just like, what's he going to be at the NHL though? This like kind of slight slippery playmaker. Those ones kind of bother me when they don't have the size or like dynamic speed, but he does have like some two-way habits, and on a Royals team that just never produces talent, I'm quasi cheering for him just because it's fun to watch decent players nearby.
His skating's scary.
Yeah, that's the big question.
But
he's taken a step this year for sure, though.
That's good.
He's better.
It wasn't terrible to Hlinka, but it was noticeable that's what I mean. At 5'10" and not, you want him to be dynamic with the feet to be that playmaker and that puck handler.
I will get the Alex Huang conversation out of the way right now. I did put him as a 25 to 32 player, but there's only so many games of him being ordinary that I can handle before he needs to slip out. I think he's an HM at the end of the day. What's really interesting with him though is like he's a phenomenal skater. And he has some passing flashes that are really, really interesting. He's been frustrating to watch so far this year. Hasn't really, he's improved his defensive game for sure. He got better throughout the Hlinka and then hit the ground running in the queue. So I think there's something there. I just don't think there's a first rounder. He's just been way too ordinary the last couple of games. Not impactful enough offensively, which is supposed to be his strong suit. So yeah, I have a lot of question marks with him.
We have 3 players who are very similar. You just talk about Huang, and there's Guillaume Mullen and Reese Milton. They're elite skaters who need to develop the rest of their games, and the most projectable is Guillaume Mullen right now. I think his defensive details are better. He shows flashes of offensive ability. Didn't do a lot, a bit like Hensler last year at the USNTDP, but I really love his skating, and he defends very well off the rush in the defensive zone. And just like Hensler, he has those flashes of activation. So we can hope that he's going to develop in the NCAA this season. And Reese Milton, I think the hockey sense is slightly below Guillaume Mullen's, and that's why I would have him behind. Again, he's an even better mover, I think. And he flashed some ability to manipulate defenders coming at him in the offensive zone last year. He hasn't shown it so far this season. But the reads he makes after that, they're not really there. Like his entire game is based on his skating, the way he moves, and so he moves and he sees if his movement created something instead of planning his movements, and that's an issue for Wang and Guillaume Mullen too, to an extent. But I would have him in that order.
I was just about to say, what about Boumediene, who the skating is a problem, but he's a terrific
the reads are much better
passer. What?
The reads are much better with him.
Yeah, he's an amazing breakout passer. He joins every rush. He has some good details defensively. He's very frustrating, but the upside is palpable with him. This is a player who, even if he has a little bit of success at Boston University at the start, he'll probably be moving up for us.
Yeah.
I also
Is
think
Wozniak.
I also think he's in the best program he could be in order to continue to develop defensively.
Yeah, he'll get the puck a ton too.
Yeah, absolutely.
They love giving the puck to the D at BU.
But I think Ben Kevin's got to go in the first, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I also have one that no one else has talked about yet, even though I keep showing you highlights in Slack.
He looks
Carter
good.
Bear.
Yeah.
This guy
Yeah.
is a weapon out there. He's in everyone's face all the time, hits everything that moves, wins every battle, gets hit from behind and gets up and wins the race to the net. He's a very deceptive playmaker. He gets a ton of scoring chances. He's a strong defensive player. He's one of those players who it's a blowout game and then he just dives headfirst in front of a puck because why not? I mean, he's crazy and he's skilled and he's smart. I think as an older player who doesn't have dynamic feet, he's going to have to continue to score at a higher rate this year. But I mean, I think he's pretty much an NHL lock, about as much as you can say for someone in October of their draft year.
Should we explain Trethaway? Because this is this is a big departure.
This is a nuclear take in the industry.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that and
Yeah.
East Wozniak, I think both of those are
Frondell.
outliers. And
Frondell.
Frondell.
We're ahead of the curve, people. That's all.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Yeah, they'll catch up. No.
Trethaway's so raw. Like, he's really mobile, but he misses. He doesn't have any details in his game. I think Russ was saying in Slack, he replied to one of my things saying he's like still kind of trying to.
He's trying to find his way.
Yeah,
he
he's
is.
trying to find his way. But still, he's an August 2nd birthday. So he's like a lot younger than most of the class.
I can tell you, I just saw him. So he is toolsy, like you guys always say an NTDP guy is. He does have a heavy wrist shot. He is a right-handed shot. Like he's fine. Like when you see him out there, he's not going to kill you, but he's not standing out right now. And I just think that it's going to take some time. Maybe it's the age thing. Maybe it's because the coach moves everybody around all the time. So I don't know. But you could see there's something there. And he's a right-handed shot, and he's like 6'2", right? So he's going to get noticed. And so he could be a guy that rises later in the year. So if we do just like honorable mention, it's not the worst thing in the world.
For sure. And he's a really solid skater. The physical tools defensively are great, but there's a complete lack of willingness to use his physicality on puck. And the panic threshold on puck is probably the lowest that I've seen in this draft class so far. If, like any forechecker even applies an ounce of pressure, the puck is like 50 feet away from Trethaway's stick within a couple seconds if it doesn't get picked off by an opponent in a dangerous area. I've liked a player like Maceo Phillips a bit more than Trethaway so far. There's definitely some more room to grow offensively with Trethaway, and there have been some flashes that are really bright in his game, but they have been like 5% of what he's been doing so far. And from what we've seen so far, I don't think that he's a first rounder, but there's definitely enough tools for him to grow into that ranking as the year progresses.
I mean, the one thing I could add that this was like pretty across the board from a lot of us watching that first weekend at the Fall Classic. This USHL team, it's one of the worst we've seen come out of the gate.
Yeah.
It's not great.
It's awful.
They have trouble playing hockey. Like, there's a lot of individual skill, but there's not much connective there. Players are late to skate their routes. There's not much getting open. It's tough watch. With Trethaway, like, I think he does have good defensive instincts. Like, I think he's really good at being the second guy in. So whether someone's trying to shift around a defenseman, then he times his movement across or coming second into a battle, he's very strong. The tools are great. He has an NHL shot. On the power play, he can do some very cool things. It's just, as Sebastian said, it's the mistakes, how quickly they compound, how he offloads the puck instantly on breakouts without even looking for better options. But if he can figure it out, he has some of the best tools in the draft class. All right. I think that pretty much rounds it out, right? We have our top 32. We have our 12 honorable mentions. I can't wait to look back at this list and laugh at how silly it was in a couple months.
As always.
October meetings.
It's the way they are.